Hey guys, it's Jason. Welcome back to Beyond Hope Project podcast. I am really excited to introduce you all to Chloë DeChelle. I met Chloë through TikTok. I was scrolling through and I saw one of her videos pop up, and I just was like kind of like sucked in by how authentic and warm she was in her videos, the way she approached the concept of mindful creation and the law of attraction, and just resonated with me. As you're all hearing here, like throughout the interview, she's a real person and she's going through real stuff and overcome a lot of really cool things, and just really, you know, I felt very vibing with, and we found out afterwards that we have a close birthday. So it kind of explains a little bit of all that stuff too. But, she really is all about helping people find their true potential, and is, like I said, available for coaching and all the stuff like that. And we have all the show notes in here to link to all of her awesome stuff that she has out there. And, every time we do these, make sure you're sharing this, helping us spread the hope, and enjoy this podcast with Chloë DeChelle. Hey, Chloë, thank you so much for joining me here. We met through a TikTok video of yours, and I really just loved the way that you presented the TikTok. And I just was like, immediately was like, hey, would you let me be on my show? And you agreed. So here we are. And I appreciate it. We
Here
had a
we
really
are.
cool, we had a cool conversation. And, I'm a huge fan of like when people are doing some really cool stuff, putting good out in the world. Let's amplify that message, and let's really find other people out there that are looking for this type of stuff. And so we kind of jump right in with a question that starts off what the whole thing is with Beyond Hope Project. So what I like to do is I'd like to give the guests the definition of how we define hope on here, which is a little different than what you would get traditionally, I guess. So I define hope as an impact point. It's the starting or the spark to the path, showing you that there is a path, right? And then the next step is that people are going to go down that path. And most people, when they go down, things don't work out the way they thought it would. And a lot of people say, I failed or whatever. And this is where we believe hope swings back around and says, like, no, you didn't fail. All that happened is maybe the path moved a little bit this way. And we try to provide that beginning and end, like the spark, and then to show you that it's there, and then be there to pick you back up when it ultimately fails you, because it will, right? And so with that definition of hope, if you can go back into any point of Chloë's life and give you some hope, like, can you give us a little context of what it would be, maybe what you would say, all that good stuff like that?
Yes. Wow. There's several points. I like that you called hope an impact point, because when I really think about the moments where I needed hope, I do tend to think about the most transitional moments of my life, where there was some sort of pivot that was about to happen, or there was some sort of catalyzation that was occurring. But the first moment that came to mind was really the first moment I realized I was feeling trapped working in jobs that I did not want to work in corporate America. And in that moment, everything was so specific and so intense, and it felt like I was just sort of in a little bit of like a fishbowl. And when I thought about life outside of that, it all felt very vague and scary and uncertain. And it took quite a bit of sort of mustering hope and courage in that moment to really move into that next phase. And that was definitely one of the moments of, where I would say if I had to go back and just pour tons of hope onto that, I would, because that was the turning point that sort of led me down the path that I'm on right now. And I would have just poured tons of hope there, because it would have made me do everything I did quicker.
Right. That's the beauty of hindsight, right? On hindsight, we can kind of look back and go like, damn, why did it take me so long? I always joke around with people now, like I've talked about on here a lot, and I've talked a lot when I do keynotes, is like, I always like kind of baffle myself, because I'm like, why did it take a brain tumor for me to wake up to my life? Like, why did it have to be that intense, And it wasn't like this was the first time it happened. I'm sure the same as you, like a lot of people listening, when you're in that corporate world, it's not like you didn't see an out. Like, it wasn't like,
Yes.
So what was that what was that point for you that gave you the strength to take that first step? Like, was it forced upon you? Was it something that you just finally said, you know what? I surrender. I'm going to step and see. Like, what was the spark for you in that point in your life?
I will say, like many moments in my life, and then I think I've also seen this in other people's lives, what it comes down to is that the pressure of being in a situation that's so inauthentic and so disconnected, eventually that sort of outweighs the fear of the unknown. So there was this moment where basically it was just like, okay, I'm either just going to continue to just pressurize myself and just create immense amounts of pressure unnecessarily and see where that leads, which was probably to some sort of burnout related situation. Or I'm just going to jump with the skill sets that I have and with the things that I know are possible with law of attraction, with manifesting. And I'm just going to see what happens. And at the very least, I would be able to say, I don't want to manifest my reality anymore. I'm just going to go back. But at the most, I would be able to say, okay, I was able to create something tangible from something intangible. And I knew that that would give me the confidence to do anything I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So that was it for me. It was just the joy started, or the possibility started to feel more exciting than the pain of staying.
Yeah. And would you say that in that step, and I'm asking this to give you context of the people that are out there that are hearing that says like, hey, I can relate to that. Was it that you found that immediately it unfolded? Like, or was it one of those things where that first step is scary as hell and you just had to take it and just trust? I think because a lot of us think that all you have to do is just wish, right? And like, if you can go in a little bit of that, like, we'll dive in definitely into what you do now with law of attraction and everything like that, which we've already talked. I'm in with you on that 100%. But I think people get confused in thinking that it's just like, that's just the magic part of it. All you got to do is just be there and say like, I'm going. And then all of a sudden it just magically shows up. Could you maybe kind of dip into some of the struggles that you learned from along the way on that, and we can talk about how you use that nowadays.
Yeah. So the way that the curve kind of was for me out of that scenario was, it was like kind of like a lot of struggle, and then I'd kind of like start thinking about what's possible, then go back to struggling. And eventually it really just kind of just started happening very quickly, like all at once. I remember like the decision for me happened over the course of like a week. And it was just like, I kind of just was like, I think I'm just going to do it. And it's really interesting because throughout my life, I would say that has sort of been a theme, like, being willing to just have a moment of courage, like being willing to just jump in the water. Like there's even a picture of me from when I was like 4 years old, getting ready to just like jump into the swimming pool. And I was like terrified, but I didn't, I had floaties on. So like looking back at that, I'm like, oh, you're going to be just fine, which is the same way that I look back on all those versions of me. Like, oh yeah, you were just fine. You had everything you needed. But it's just when you're in that sort of subjective experience, sometimes it just takes that, like I said before, the pressure sort of building up to sort of push you into the water.
Right.
And so that is a lot of the struggle, is dealing with the emotional regulation when the stakes are seemingly very high, when you have very real bills that are due, when you have people that are dependent on you, when you have, expectations that you feel like you're trying to meet internally and externally. And then saying, yeah, I'm going to do something that makes me appear on the outside to look a little bit like someone who's kind of flippant and doesn't really care and is irresponsible. But knowing that it's the most responsible thing I could do based on what's going on inside of me.
Right.
So it really takes this very, intense willingness to say, I trust my path. I trust my process, no matter what this is going to look like to other people. And trusting that even the people around you that are witnessing this, that might have thoughts about your process, or that might have thoughts that you're not doing what you should be doing, those people may find themselves at some point in a part of their journey where they would need to know that courage is possible. And so to me, that was always my sort of back and forth internally, or the struggle that always came up, was what it looked like versus what was actually happening.
Yeah. That's great. And what impact do you think the stories we tell ourselves have on those moments for ourselves?
Everything.
Yeah. Right. And
yeah,
it's
everything.
Did you find yourself, because see if this is relatable to you, like, when I like to tell people, and in my own reflections where I kind of came to this, is I realized that, like, during good days, we don't tell ourselves stories. Like, during good days, we just kind of go. And it's like, but the second something goes bad, like, we dip into just the worst stories about ourselves, and we draw connections to, like, a whole lifetime. Like, it's like we take every mistake we've ever made, and that becomes our reality story. How do you catch yourself when you're being a bad storyteller to yourself?
Well, now it's really one of those quote unquote like skill sets that's unconsciously competent for me. So it's just totally natural. I just will catch it because I'm just so used to just looking for it. But I think the underlying assumption that got me to the place where it's just an unconscious thing that I do was just assuming that everything that's happening in my experience is happening for my evolution. So that sort of reframes when things are triggering. You start to feel like, okay, well, if I'm assuming that everything is happening for my evolution, for my benefit, for me to get stronger, happier, more joyful, more free, there's something in here for me. So then I become more interested and curious about the experience that I'm having inside of the body. Then I am interested in projecting onto it via the narrative.
Yeah.
And that's the part of it where it's like, most people think like, yeah, I'm thinking through this and I'm thinking about what needs to happen next. And it's like, no, you're not. You're actually projecting based on a story that you're telling that's based on the emotions that are triggered. So if you just default to being curious about the emotions that are triggered, and hey, like, where's this coming from for me? What am I really afraid of here? And getting really grounded in what your body is experiencing. That to me is probably one of the biggest skill sets that you could develop when it comes to this type of work, conscious creatorship.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful. I think that the idea that you can't go into a situation, and my wife reminds me of this often because I'm a recovering bad storyteller myself too. And in sharpening that. And it's one of those things that feels like to me, like, just when you think you got it under control, like, you'll get a little like, hey, and I just did before this a solo episode where I talked about I have a cataract in my left eye. But
okay.
In my right eye, to give you context, I had a cataract as well. The difference was I had the cataract and I had a cataract surgery. A month later is when they discovered the brain tumor. So of course, when my left eye started flaring up a couple weeks ago, I immediately thought, oh my God, my brain tumor's back. And I started telling myself, it's a related thing. And it's completely unrelated. And then luckily, by happenstance, I just happened to have an MRI scheduled that week. And so it's all clear. Everything's all good. But it is that thing that she reminds me all the time is like, you can't go into a situation expecting what you're expecting. Like you're always going to be let down. You can't go into it, always thinking, oh, this is how it's going to go. And I think that's what a lot of us steal our joy in, talking about the work you do right now and, conscious creation and stuff like that. I know you work a lot in mindfulness practices with people, law of attraction. You're on TikTok. I highly recommend. I'll make sure in the show notes that everybody follows you. Like the way that you go about it's really cool. I love what really captivated me when I told you was that it's approachable, and it's like you're approachable. Awesome. And it's like, it takes something that I think most people feel from the outside looking in. I can't do that. and you have a really unique ability to kind of do that. And I wonder if you can kind of go into a
Thank
little bit
you.
about like where you think that came from. Like, were you surrounded by, women in your life that did this? Was there a person you can look back that made you learn what it was like to be approachable to people and to get people to like, I think it takes a certain person that people want to like go like, I want to
Mm-hmm.
share my real stuff with somebody, but I, what gets people to like open up to you and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Um, I think what gets people to open up, I mean, one of the biggest things that comes to mind when I'm connecting to that question is it's just the fact that um, I do tend to be very open to my own experience, like very open and curious about my own experience. And I do tend to be generally, as a result of that, open to other people's experience and just sort of, seeing it from this perspective that, like, of course, this is what's happening. Like, I just give people the benefit of the doubt. Like, I tend to just really trust, like, oh, if you're experiencing this, of course you're experiencing this, and this is allowed to be here. And I do think that, like, the more comfortable anyone is on their own emotional spectrum, it does sort of create a really beautiful resonance with other people's emotional spectrum. And it gives them sort of a permission slip to be open to their own emotional spectrum. And some people will come into contact with that openness and it feels very like intense for them because they're like, wait a minute, I don't want to be open to my whole emotional spectrum. but some people are like, oh my gosh, I've been waiting to be open to myself. I've been waiting to feel these things and explore some of these things. And so they'll just go right to it. And those people, I find those people every day. And I'm so grateful for that because it's my greatest joy is being able to reflect back to people possibility and just like what's possible for them in their lives.
That's great. Yeah. And I think that's what is really awesome is that like I said, I think you're really approachable in the way you do it. And it definitely comes across. So kudos to you for that, because I know that
Thank
I
you.
know what kind of work you had to do on yourself to get to that point, and being that I hear the same sort of thing when I talk to people and things like that. And I think at
Yeah.
first it's kind of weird because you go like, well, man, I'm just being myself. But then you realize that like, oh
Yeah.
wait, like not everybody does that. And you're just like, so how
Yeah.
do you approach it
Mm-hmm.
when you have somebody that's like, let's say, maybe if there's somebody out there that's listening to this, like, man, I really want to be able to like, talk to Chloe, but I'm crazy afraid to be there. Like, what is your approach in somebody that is coming to you like petrified, but they know that they want to tackle this thing? Like, are there some tips to get anybody that's reluctant to take that chance on somebody like you to reach out and say like, hey, I got this. I'm at this job. I'm at that spot you just talked about. Like, what was that courage point?
Yeah. Yeah. So, the advice I would have for someone who's feeling reluctant to start making any changes is just to acknowledge that changes are already happening.
Mm,
It's not really something you're in control of.
right.
It's just happening. This entire experience is impermanent. Every second is a brand new second, even if it looks slightly the same.
Yeah.
And there's momentum that is happening at every level and layer of our existence. It's just constant becoming. And so the real question is not whether or not you want to change. The question is, do you want to have a hand in the changes? Or do you want to let whatever conditioning is already there by default make the changes on your behalf?
Mm.
So it's kind of like asking someone, like, if you had to paint a painting that was going to be in your house for 50 years, do you want to have a part in the design? Or do you just want to let any artist come in? Like, you might absolutely hate, that style of art
Yeah.
that this artist comes in and does. But you're going to live with this on your wall for the next, however many years. So do you want a say in it? And I think what happens when people realize that they don't actually have control over whether or not things are changing, but they do have control about which direction they're willing to flow in with those changes. It sort of creates this moment of empowerment to say, okay, of course I would want to be a co-creator in this experience. Of course I would want to contribute to this. And you're able to tap into the desire you have a bit more than the fear.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like giving yourself a little bit of permission to dream, right? To kind of like, and I think it's, one of the early things I started adopting was, working on the idea of like, stop expecting something and accept everything, and kind of just be like, like whether I like it or not, the world is going to keep spinning whether I'm here or not. But when I'm here, I can really have some sort of impact. And, there is nobody on this earth that will ever exist that can do it the exact way I can. So why am I holding this all to myself? And that was ultimately where I kind of came up against the wall for myself and change was that, okay, like I'm still here. Like this thing didn't kill me, right? Okay, so there's a reason. So now I could be a total jerk and not share, or I can share what I learned in hopes that I can catch somebody else before they have to have that thing. And I think that's a big part, just to echo back what you're saying, is like eventually something's going to shake your world enough where change, if you want to call it that or whatever, it's going to shake you enough where you're going to have to figure stuff out, or it's going to just roll you over. Right. And I think that's a big chunk. And how, like, what are some things that you tend to do that are your habits every day that helps you stay grounded in those types of things as you're going through like a bad day or you're overstressed, or there's little tips that you have picked up along the way that are like tools that help you navigate those moments for yourself?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, a lot of how I respond in my day-to-day to life, it has to do with where I'm at in my own process. It has to do with like, am I in a space where I am in negative momentum or am I in positive momentum? I will respond very differently based on how, which side of the spectrum I'm on. If I'm in like a negative momentum, I tend to become very self-reflective and curious. Like I think curiosity is a part of my day-to-day experience with just my own inner world. As someone who I went through like more of an intellectual awakening before my body started to integrate, which happens to a lot of people, but that definitely happened to me. And one of the things that came out of that sort of bifurcation of like having all these things above my neck and not below my neck was that my head would be like, well, you've already learned this. Why is this coming up? What's going on? And my head would kind of hijack a little bit my process and would create like more shame than necessary around feelings that were going on in the body. And so I've learned to really see myself as more of an ecosystem than just a streamlined, like linear, one-dimensional being. It's like, just because I've learned something mentally, I know that it doesn't mean that I'm fully integrated. And so I always just sort of connect to my emotions as though I'm connecting for the first time. And I just ask like, hey, what's coming up for you? Like, where's this coming from? And I genuinely listen into the body. That's a huge part of my practice. But the other part of my practice, I would say, is just generally being intentional about appreciation and about finding the joy and giving people the benefit of the doubt, and just those little things that we can do in our day-to-day that move the needle a little bit. Because it kind of reminds me of like when you're on a plane and the plane's like flying cross country. It's like if that plane, the nose of the plane, were to shift even 1 degree, you'll end up like 3,000 miles away from the destination you're going to be at. It's like all the little moments that you have to choose joy throughout the day. Those moments make a massive difference in the outcomes that happen on your timeline. So I I actually, even though I teach, a lot of methodologies and techniques, for me, I really don't do very many techniques.
Yeah.
I just focus on being here in this moment
Yeah.
in a way that allows joy and that allows me to appreciate the little things and that allows me to connect and to give the love that I'm wanting to experience in the world.
Right. Yeah. And it's, I'm just curious how much of your own stuff did you have to tackle to get to that place though? Did you have personally, I had a huge mountain of self-doubt and self-hatred and stuff I had to kind of address before I got to the place you are, where I feel like you and I are very in a similar spot where I have certain things I do, but I don't have to do it what I had to do when I started. Right. And
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people, I equate stuff like kids when I was, growing up, I wanted to be a professional baseball player, right? And I looked at my favorite players and I was like, I want to be them. And what you don't understand when
Love
you're a
it.
kid is that, your parents are always saying like, well, you got to work really hard. Those guys, but as a kid, it's just like, oh no, I can do that, right? Because it looks easy. And I think that the reason
Yeah.
why I asked that question is because I think a lot of times people that, quote unquote, have it together, people think, oh, I can do that. It's going to be easy. And and that's the reason why I'm asking this question that way is because like to give people like the context of like, understand that this is work. It's not like, there's no magic wand that's just going to come over. You're going to have to kind of face some of your stuff that you've been maybe shelving for a long time and saying, like, I don't want to deal with,
Yeah.
like what would you say, like, if you kind of look back at that process of yourself, like, did you have moments where you felt like you were taking one step forward and 30 steps back and like you're uncovering stuff? You're like, oh my God,
Definitely.
what the hell? Like, I just thought I had that figured out. And then there's another, did you have that as well?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I had a lot of moments like that because I think on some level I used to assume that, okay, if I've got it once, then I can just stay happy. I had sort of a destination based thinking going on where I was like, okay, I'm going to get to this destination where I will just stay happy. But the thing is that even if you stay in alignment 100% of the time, you're still, because everything is always expanding. That's the nature of our experience. It's always expanding. There's always momentum. Even if you're in alignment all the time, you're still going to manifest growth opportunities, which are going to feel uncomfortable because they're expanding you.
Mm-hmm.
They're taking you out of that comfort zone and they're putting you in a place where you might not have the strength built up yet to tackle that immediately. So it might be uncomfortable. So I definitely will say, I used to think that those moments of contraction were something I was doing wrong, but it's the in and out breath of life. Like that's what happens. You ride that wave up to more and more of your experience, and you're sort of asymptotically approaching this line of quote unquote, perfection. But the point is that it's asymptotic. You're not going to be there ever. That's the point of it. The point of it is that you're on a journey within a journey within a journey, and it just keeps unfolding forever. And then I also wanted to mention this one thing before I forget, because you talked about how like when you're a kid, it feels like it's so easy. Like, of course I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
And on some level, that kid self is tapping into the truth, because what that kid self is experiencing is, oh, I'm resonating with the fact that they're in the flow. Mm. I'm resonating with like the ease of that. But the most difficult thing, and this is sort of the balance of this journey, is that it's not easy. What it is that it's unlearning the difficulty that's difficult.
Yeah.
It's actually like integrating ease that's hard, because we live on planet Earth. So on planet Earth at this time, it is, we learn a lot of very difficult ways of being. And yeah. It's a part of our journey of desire and contrast and expansion. So yeah.
No, I agree. And I think that it's interesting because there was like, I want to say it was like Jim Carrey was doing some commencement at a meditation school. I know it's like out there on the internet. And it's like, and he talks about how he was having this amazing meditation one time, and he was like, he felt like at one with the universe and everything was in alignment and it was amazing and the world opened up to him. And then he pauses and in like in a comedic way, he goes, and I've been chasing that ever since. And I think that
Yeah.
people do that. Like we think that it's a one time and done, like it's a one and done thing. And I have in meditation practice and stuff like that myself had those times where, I've sat for, I mean, I think the other day I sat through 2 guided meditations and it was like an hour and I had just been sitting there, but I was so in the moment. It wasn't even like I was like attracting anything. It wasn't like I was like, I just was
Yep.
sitting and it just
Yeah.
felt so at peace with it. And when I
Mm-hmm.
started this stuff, and this is, I guess I'm saying it as a warning for people, is that like, that's never going to happen again like that. Like it's always going to be a new version of that kind of thing. And we kind of get stuck
Yeah.
in that trap of thinking like, this is a one and done stuff. But, and I think this is where, finding people like Chloe are really important because they can be guides through that process as you go through and awakening to yourself and figuring it out because it does tend to be lonely a little bit because sometimes you're going to have some friends. I don't know if you had this experience too, and I'll let you answer, but like where you start going like, hey, yo, I'm going to go on this path over here. And you always got those friends. And those, I don't know why we listen to those friends or we like allow them to be the louder voice that goes like, man, you're crazy. Like, this is like, what do you think you're doing? Did you have any of that experience like that with the inner circle people that are, I always like to tell people like, don't be surprised if the people that uproot you the quickest are the ones that are the closest to you. Did you ever have
Yeah.
any of that
Yeah.
stuff with you in your path as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like for the most part, my like core like support system, they've all kind of just continued to grow with me. And some of those folks I've known since I've been like on this journey, literally, since 12 years ago. Some of those folks I've known since then. But there are some people where, and I've kind of learned, I would say, over the years, not to add too much meaning to this for myself, but there have been people where you can just sort of feel that bifurcation happen where their soul's just choosing a different route. And, I feel like I've been very okay with, for the most part, when that happens, I just sort of trust it. And again, coming from that underlying assumption that everything is happening for my expansion, for my benefit. But I've been mostly okay with it. But there have been times when, because I'm so focused on my path, I'll look up and realize, wow, I haven't thought about that person for 6 months, or I haven't thought about that person for a year. And they just totally will fall out of my field frequency wise. And I think there can be sometimes this temptation to say like that person's, on a worse path or something, and I'm on this growth path. But the thing that's interesting is I have seen so many people just not for any really good reason other than it just wasn't their path of least resistance depart. It just happens. And sometimes you don't know why, but a lot of it is just trusting, like, hey, if there's not resonance here, I'm willing to trust that and I'm willing to let go and really just forgive the moment gracefully.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So in your quest to like, as we circle back to that first question, I'm just curious, like if you could, if you were at across the table from the Chloe that was at that corporate gig that was, feeling at that dead end and all that stuff like that. And that was at the point where it was like confused, like where you started to kind of feel it, right? And you can go back in time and sit across the table
Yeah.
from her, like, and you told her all the stuff you've been able to do since. Like, what do you think
Yeah.
that her reaction would be to that kind of thing?
Like she'd probably start crying. I was crying a lot at that time because I would like release a lot of resistance through tears. I feel like she'd probably start crying. She'd probably still probably be really scared because I think at that point I really wanted that reassurance of like the journey's going to be easy. I think that was always the fear I had was like, yeah, I know I could get there, but like, is the journey going to be okay?
Yeah.
I always kind of was like scared of that stuff. But I think what I would probably say to her would be something along the lines of, it's not really about what happens next. It's about who you become next. And I would just let her know that everything she's looking for, she already has. So it would just be looking inside.
Yeah. I love that answer.
That would really be the conversation.
Yeah. I think it's always amazing as we go out on these quests, right? And we realize in hindsight that like, damn, it was there that whole time. Like, and here I went thinking I had to go out all these spots, and you wish that you can have that time back, because you're like, man, I spent so much time thinking that I had to chase this down and I had to chase that down. And I always wonder, like in Alice in Wonderland, it's like we're kind of like that, that rabbit. You're running after that rabbit always. And it's not till you kind of stop and go like, yo, that rabbit doesn't exist. It's just is, that's time. That's what it represents. It's just time. And really it's about just kind of getting to know us and realize that, like, everything that you want to have happen for you is hidden behind everything you're afraid to like face. And
very well said.
It's so hard though. It's so incredibly hard to find that bravery and courage in stepping into it. And I think that's where, in my quest, and I know we share the same sort of thing because we talked about it, was like, I want to be the best anti-guru, right? And it's not like this is how you do it. It's more about like, look at what we're doing and this is how we did it, and understand that you're serving as a guidepost. Like, yo, this can be done. It's not, we're regular people. And this is where I was really drawn to your stuff on TikTok, where it's that like, oh, this is a real person. This isn't somebody standing on a stage in front of 10,000 people saying for $19.99 a month, I'm going to solve all of your issues. Like and I think that's the other part is like, people, we're inundated with these different gurus out there, and we don't realize, and I guess I'm saying this to the people listening, is that like, understand that a lot of those people are paying to get into your feed. They're paying to get into your feed to sell you more stuff. Whereas the people that are showing up authentically and you're actually resonating with, those are the people that you should reach out to. And, and I want to like, bring that up because I know we're getting close towards the end, but I want to make sure that we're covering what you do now, so people can find you and all that good stuff like that as well. I found you on TikTok. I know you're on Instagram as well. Do you have a favorite platform that you tend to go to if people are looking to connect to you? Is there a way that they should like search you? And I'll definitely have all your links here, but is there a way that they know they can get you for sure?
Yeah. So whether you message me on TikTok or on Instagram, I'll for sure get it because I'm just on both platforms pretty regularly. But most of what I'm teaching, as far as direct teaching goes, is on TikTok.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I think for folks who sense of that, it would be definitely through TikTok. So yeah, I think that would be the best place. Would be TikTok.
Okay, great. And did they can get in touch with you to get like coaching and work through all this stuff, and you provide a multi-level service. It's not just, the videos are great, but like, like anything, like there is more to it than just the quick videos on TikTok and stuff like that.
Yes. And I think, I think the folks that really want to explore, they can definitely reach out and have a call with me and chat, or we can do an actual coaching call. But I'm also going to be coming out with a course soon as well, because I do feel like there's some people that just want to be able to self-pace and learn some of these things and apply some of these things in that setting. That's some of the feedback that I'm getting. And so, I have already sort of started the process of putting that all together, and it'll be out like probably within the next couple of weeks.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And, I think, again, I just want to like echo back to the stuff we were talking about where, it is that acknowledging it's scary, for people to realize that like, that evolution is scary. But I also think that in that process, what you'll realize too, is that pretty much anything you've accomplished in life started out at a scary point. And I think that hopefully
so true.
people can hear that will echo, but it is by finding people like Chloë to reach out to that will help you see that it's scary for them as well. Like the people that have mastered this stuff, it wasn't like somehow it just magically was handed to them and it wasn't scary. The process, like, so when you're looking for people to connect with, it is people like Chloë that are going through it, that have been through it, that are really going to be the ones that are going to help shape your life. It's so much easier to work with people that have done it versus people that are just students of it, and they've gotten really good at speaking to speak of it. So, I just want to encourage all that stuff. Is there anything else that we can kind of, as we wrap up here, that you would like to extend out to people or like to say before we wrap up? Is there anything else that was left unsaid?
Well, I want to just echo what you just said, actually. What you just said about, we're just normal people. All the fears that anyone who's listening to this might have about their journey and about what's possible for them, or about what it means to really cross the chasm from where you are to where you want to go. Just know that you're listening to two people that have crossed the chasm safely. We've made it across. And at the end of the day, no one, ourselves included, definitely, there's nothing that we have that is different than anything you have. The only difference is just, for whatever reason, looking in the direction of where we want to go and consistently looking in that direction. And if looking in that direction inspires you to reach out to someone, great. But even if you never reach out, just please trust that you have what you need.
Yeah.
Please. Even if you never go to my TikTok, even if you never buy anything, even if you never try to get coaching from me or anyone else, you have it. A lot of it is just trusting that and allowing confirmation bias to show you that is the case. That's
wonderful. What a perfect way to wrap up.
Yeah.
And so, guys, as we're wrapping up here, I wanted to just encourage you and just reaffirm to you all that you're doing a great job. Being a human is not easy. It is ups and downs, and it is trials and errors. But you're doing a good job. And if somebody hasn't told you lately that they're proud of you, know that we're both proud of you. You've accomplished way more, and you're way tougher than you're giving yourself credit for. But just keep going, keep riding a prize. And above all else, we just hope this helped. And Chloë, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
And wherever you travel next, and let's keep in touch. I'm certainly following you on TikTok. Absolutely. And I can't wait to keep up with that. And I encourage everybody to check the show notes and make sure you're following Chloë as well. So have safe travels, and we'll talk soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Foxland Media. Think big.